They came in the dead of night. Nicolas Maduro, a man who ruled Venezuela with an iron fist, was seized, not by diplomats, not by sanctions, but by the sheer force of a US operation. In one instant, decades of carefully measured global calculations were shattered. Smiles in Beijing's boardrooms, 600 agreements, billions in oil deals gone in hours. At the UN, allies and rivals alike recoiled. France called it a breach of the very foundation of international order. China condemned the act as bullying. Russia denounced imperialism. Europe hesitated, caught between principle and pragmatism. This was not just Venezuela. It was a seismic test of the rules that govern power, a moment that asks, what happens when force replaces law? If you want to understand how fragile global systems really are, stay with me. The seizure of Maduro raised a fundamental question. How do powerful nations exercise authority without breaking the rules that govern the world? For decades, global politics relied on a fragile understanding. States could compete, pressure each other, sanction each other, but outright force against a sitting government carried costs. Rules existed and consequences followed. China built its strategy around that predictability. Loans instead of lectures, oil flowing east, infrastructure projects designed to last decades. No public pressure, no regime change headlines, just a slow transactional accumulation of influence. Trump's operation shattered that assumption overnight. Negotiation replaced by spectacle, patience replaced by speed, ambiguity replaced by blunt messages. The question now looms, if sovereignty can be breached this quickly, what plans are truly safe? And what does that mean for the systems that depend on stability? At the turn of the century, China's economy was exploding. Factories multiplied, cities expanded, energy demand surged, oil became strategy. Venezuela had what China needed: cash, infrastructure projects, time, and Venezuela needed what China could provide: loans, development, patience. Between 2000 and 2023, over $100 billion flowed from China into Venezuela. In return, oil flowed east, steady, predictable, apolitical. This was the long game, a model China repeated across the global south. It worked because it relied on one assumption: sovereignty, once recognized, would not be shattered overnight. China invested quietly, avoided ideology, avoided confrontation. No headlines, no shocks, only the slow accrual of influence. Trump's raid did not remove just a partner. It broke the timeline. Decades of patience collided with a single night of force. Confidence cracked first, and once confidence breaks, consequences rarely stay local. The first shock came in hours. A nighttime raid, a president seized. A photograph raced around the world faster than any official statement. For China, this was the moment theory met reality. Their careful calculations, their risk models, their decades of patient investment, all tested in one dramatic event. State media condemned the move. Officials spoke of sovereignty, international law, and restraint. But beneath the words, a deeper fear lingered. Assets could be frozen, oil shipments delayed, infrastructure projects stranded in political limbo. And more than that, the signal reached every other country watching. If alignment with China does not shield you from sudden shock, what is the point of loyalty? The ripple spread quietly. Executives paused projects. Banks delayed financing. Risk committees rewrote assumptions overnight. This was not chaos in the streets. It was chaos in the calculations, and it affected every decision that depended on stability. If you want to understand how power truly erodes, pay attention to moments like this. China's strategy relied on predictability. Loans were extended with long horizons. Projects were designed to last decades. Influence was accumulated slowly, almost invisibly. The system depended on one quiet guarantee: investments would not be abruptly nullified by force. Trump's raid exposed the hidden vulnerability. China can manage debt risk. It can absorb losses. It can renegotiate terms. But uncertainty injected from the outside cannot be planned for. When force replaces process, calculations break down. Risk models fail. Assurances become meaningless. The danger was not only losing assets in Venezuela, it was the precedent set for every future deal. If the United States is willing to act unilaterally, every Chinese-backed project carries a geopolitical shadow. Beijing faced a dilemma: accept higher risk everywhere or pull back. Neither option was comfortable. Both undermined decades of patient, careful strategy. And once the mechanism begins to seize up, the next crisis does not come from headlines. It comes from hesitation, delays, and decisions not taken. The second escalation arrived not with troops, but with fear. Uncertainty spread. Beijing assumed the worst-case scenarios. Assets could be nationalized, loans could be frozen, oil flows could be redirected under pressure. Chinese companies like CNPC and Sinopec were among the largest players on the ground. Their exposure was real. Their timelines were long, and now their protection seemed thin. Executives paused projects. Banks delayed financing. Risk committees rewrote assumptions overnight. There were no press conferences, no dramatic announcements, only a slowing of motion. At the same time, Beijing watched Washington closely. Latin America was no longer neutral ground. It had become contested space. Every investment started to look political. Escalation without explosions. Pressure without sanctions. Choices forced before anyone was ready. The real damage often starts quietly, in decisions not taken. And those decisions ripple outward, touching lives far from Caracas. For ordinary Venezuelans, chaos does not arrive as a headline. It arrives quietly. Shortages appear in markets. Delays in projects ripple through communities. Jobs become uncertain. Contracts may not be renewed. Prices rise suddenly. You feel it in your daily life. Savings eroded by inflation. Uncertainty replacing security. All because strategic messages were sent far above your head. Decisions made in boardrooms and UN chambers dictate your tomorrow. The seizure of Maduro is more than geopolitics. It is the human cost of instability. People like you bear the consequences of power struggles, diplomacy, and risk assessments. And yet, these moments reveal something else. They teach resilience. They show how deeply interconnected our lives are with the decisions of nations. If you feel this, reflect on the systems that govern you. Think about how fragile stability can be, and stay aware, because these forces shape not only Venezuela, but the world you live in. The shock of Maduro's seizure did not stop at Venezuela's borders. Across South America, governments watched closely, not the legality of the raid, but the consequences of standing too close to one power. Ports, energy projects, and food supply chains all suddenly sat inside a larger geopolitical equation. China's investments were at risk. Hundreds of billions of dollars in trade and infrastructure could be disrupted. Washington made its position clear. Latin America is strategic territory, and strategic territory comes with limits. Countries were forced to choose not based on economics, but on fear of retaliation. For China, the promise of patience over pressure suddenly looked fragile. Europe, long reliant on the United States, faced the dilemma of balancing principle against security dependence. Even decisions far from the conflict were affected. Investment slowed, financing paused, strategic planning recalculated. Every action was now political. Every delay had consequences. The world economy, global stability, and diplomatic alliances were being reshaped. The ripple of one raid reached far beyond Caracas. From Beijing's perspective, there are three paths ahead. The first is optimistic. China absorbs the shock. Assets remain intact. Trade with Washington stabilizes. Latin American partners, wary of volatility, lean more toward a power that promises patience over pressure. Chaos becomes America's problem, not China's. The second path is more likely. Uncertainty lingers. Investment slows. Governments hedge quietly between Washington and Beijing. China keeps its foothold, but momentum fades. Influence grows harder, slower, more expensive. Then there is the darkest path. The precedent spreads. Interventions multiply. Partners pull back, fearing they might be next. China does not lose everywhere at once, but credibility erodes piece by piece. Trust, once broken, cannot be restored by balance sheets alone. These scenarios reveal a larger truth. Power is no longer just about strength. It is about predictability. When rules collapse, the world becomes harder to plan, not just for China, not just for the United States, for anyone who relies on stability. What we have witnessed is more than a raid. It is a lesson in how power operates when rules no longer apply. For decades, the global system rewarded patience. Rules mattered, timelines mattered. Stability was a form of power. That era is fading. When force replaces process, when shock replaces signal, the world becomes unpredictable. China understands this instinctively. It hesitates, it recalculates, not because it is weak, but because its rise was built on order. And the real risk is not chaos itself, it is what chaos teaches others to do next. Every decision now carries a shadow of uncertainty. Every plan is fragile. You, the observer, are part of this system. The way we respond, the choices we make, will define the next chapter. If this analysis helped you see the world more clearly, subscribe, comment your thoughts. Share this understanding, because the next moment of disruption may already be underway and the rules you relied on may no longer exist.